we're on track with implementing the comprehensive plan. And I know once the 18 plan was approved, it just kind of sat on a shelf and wasn't really utilized again. And so when I started, one of the things I looked at is how outdated is it, and has the implementation process been followed through? And the answer was, it was outdated. It's been 5 years now, and it doesn't seem like any implementation or even annual review had happened for the comp plan since it was adopted. So that's one thing we want to change. And then the other thing is plans, again, every couple years should be looked at and make sure that they're still consistent with the values and direction that the community wants to go. And so last summer, I did a public outreach process, attended all the block parties, the 4th of July, just asked a bunch of questions of the community. I did get a lot of feedback at that time, which I do have as part of the appendices, and you can see that on the website. I gave you a link to that. Just to hear back from everybody. I did get a lot of feedback on that one. And then we formed a working group that was approved by the Board of Trustees. The membership kind of declined over time, but we still had a good group of 10 solid members that would attend most regularly. And as Kat had mentioned, what we did was we brought in a bunch of experts in different areas, stormwater. We had our engineers for water. We had LPA and Black Hills Energy to talk about utilities. We had Forecore to help us with sustainability measures. So we had a lot of, we had the Division of Housing, or the State Division of Housing, come and talk to us about housing. We had La Plata Economic Development Alliance and Region 9 to talk about economic development. So we brought in a lot of people, and I did that because we did it for free. I wasn't a consultant. I tried to do everything in-house and bring in people that I knew would come in and support our community, just because they wanted to see our community succeed in what we were doing. And so it was a 100% free process to go through this comp plan rewrite without any consultants, and just getting that expertise, which I also learned a lot from just having these speakers come in. And then each time we had a speaker, we talked about it as a group, about the current comp plan language and what we wanted to see. And then I try to take what I heard from the group and go back and write some goals and policies based on what I heard from our working group. And some months we could do it in one meeting. A lot of months we had to have a separate working group subcommittee meet, so they would meet twice a month to kind of dig into some of these policies and goals in a little more detail, and then present it back to the bigger group. And so different people would volunteer for the different subcommittees based on the topic. And so what we ended up with was a rewrite of the comp plan. Now it's not 100% rewritten. There are still a lot of goals and policies in there that were in the older comprehensive plan, but it also, we wanted to make sure we added some of the things that we're dealing with now. And COVID really changed our environment, and so how do we address that in our comprehensive plan? Housing right now, with the cost of housing, has really impacted our community, so how are we trying to address that in the comp plan? So there are things that we really didn't talk about in the old plan that we wanted to bring into the new plan in more detail. And another one was just agriculture. Looking at Bayfield and having these discussions about economic development, one of the topics that kept coming up is, we have a lot of agriculture. We should be tapping into that. That could be Bayfield's thing. That could be something that sets us apart from Durango and Ignacio in terms of economic development, is how do we embrace our agriculture roots. And so we actually, for the first time, now have an agriculture chapter in the comprehensive plan. And so those are probably some of the big things, but just some of the other things that we looked at was we updated our demographic information I got from the 2020 census and the state demographer, so we're kind of aligned with where things are today. Again, affordable and workforce housing goals. We had some housing goals, but really concentrating on affordable and workforce housing as we move forward, and making sure that we still have a livable community for our residents, our teachers, our firefighters, our town employees, our police department, our other employees. We have a lot of employees that commute to Durango and look at Bayfield as their home, and how do we make sure they can still afford to live here. We also looked at refining our stormwater goals. You know, we had the big stormwater events of 2022, and that did change. It changed how we look at stormwater. It made stormwater a high priority for the Board of Trustees, and so now we have that feasibility study that we're looking at, and probably in mid-2024 we'll have a stormwater fee in place so that the town can go in and start maintaining our stormwater facilities. And so we wanted to make sure we brought that into the comp plan. And then, you know, with the changes that we're seeing with water conservation and drought years, we wanted to really make water a big theme in this comprehensive plan. How are we going to move forward in the future and make sure that we have enough water for our community? And one of the things that we're already implementing is the WaterWise with the Sonoran Institute. We were accepted as one of the 2 communities in for this year, so it's a year process to look at WaterWise measures that we can do in our community, landscaping standards. And so we've already met with them twice, and we have a really good framework of how we want to move forward with that. There's going to be some public outreach as part of that process. And so that's already going to be helping us implement some of these policies in the comprehensive plan. And then hazards, you know, the county's in the process of updating their hazard mitigation plan, which includes Bayfield. It's not complete, so most of our plan still references the 2018 plan, but, you know, some of our bigger hazards, again, drought, fire, probably the biggest one is the dam failure. That could be catastrophic for the community. And so how do we move forward looking at those hazards and make sure that we are addressing those as we move forward with future development in the community? And so those are probably the big ones. And then some of the other things I know Kat had reminded me of was, you know, we're looking at building aesthetics, multimodal, making sure we have multimodal connection and circulation throughout the community. We're going to be looking at oil and gas regulations. And so that was in the comp plan, as well as just protecting our natural resources as a whole. We know that we have a lot of natural resources in our area, and how do we grow and move forward and make sure that we're still protecting what we have and value in our community. So those are probably the big things that this comprehensive plan really addresses as part of the update. And then, like I said, you know, the working group, the public outreach, I kind of joke around because when we did the Joe Stevenson Park survey for the community, we got almost 400 responses and comments. And then I send out the comprehensive plan and give people a month, and we put it in the newsletter, we put it online and social media, and I got 1 comment. And it was about a future land use map change. And that's one thing, we're not proposing any changes to the future land use map at this level. Really, it was concentrating on the language in the comp plan. What I did for the future land use map is I just updated it based on all the annexations and comp plan changes that have already been approved. So I just updated the map, but we are not proposing any changes as part of this process. I know the landowner who requested that was a little disappointed, but what we want to make sure is when somebody comes in and wants to do a map change, that the neighbors have a chance to comment on that, since it will impact the adjacent neighbors, and that didn't happen as part of this process. And so what we told them is, when it's not an annexed property, so when they annex and go through that process, we'll make sure we have the neighbor outreach, and they can request it at that time. So, but other than that, I didn't receive any, and so it's a little disappointing, but I did get a lot of feedback up front, and I did have a really good working group that I really enjoy working with, and I look at those as definitely pluses, that we still got to reach community members and have involvement in this process. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not going to read the comp plan to you right now because I don't think you guys want me to read it in 2 hours. But answer any questions on that. And I did also want to make sure you saw that we also looked at our current mission, vision, and values for the community. This is something that was adopted when we did the Where Stars Shine Bright slogan came from. And again, this was a process that I did take to the community last summer, and got a lot of feedback on our mission, vision, and values. And so wanting to make sure that you guys had a chance to look at that too. And both of those would be something that staff is hoping that you will support to the Board of Trustees. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know I have 4 working group members, plus Katie and Jeremy were at every meeting too, that are present. And I don't know if they wanted to add anything to that.
I've been really looking over the mission, vision, and values. I think you guys absolutely nailed it on the updates. My question, and it's maybe for the teachers or the English majors in this room, but I know a mission statement, you want it to be one sentence and be direct. Is that, it seems like a long, very long sentence to me. A lot of ands, a lot of commas, and I don't know if it should be broken up or if I'm just being nitpicky, but
They usually do have,
yeah. I
one,
mean, it
and
reads
it's usually
like the-
one honking statement.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go,
We just went back and forth on this with Region 9 too, because it
Yeah.
ended up being a really, really long one sentence. But I was just wondering if there was
and
any
you're
thoughts on
sitting
that.
there going, all right, there, I'm sure it's a run-on, but you have to deal with it. It's my best information for you.
Okay. Just don't want anybody to accuse us of being Baytucky, you know, and like not having our.
I think the commas are all correct.
They're all correct. It's
They are
just a
correct.
very long sentence. A lot of
just-
ands and a lot, yeah. I read it so many times, it makes sense. It reads right,
You
I'm
just
just
keep-
wondering if it
You
could be.
keep trying to get your breath while you're reading it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta pause in the right spots and. But I think
Well, if
that's
you
just
have any
being,
suggestions, I'm open to.
I mean, I don't know, that's why I'm asking, I didn't major in English, that's for sure. but I did go to school for a lot of years, it's not,
Well, it's interesting, because when you look at our sister communities, oh, do I need to go? up there?
Yep.
Yeah, just for the
I'm just so
microphone.
comfortable with you. Geez, I feel like I should have coffee and cookies over here. So when I looked at other neighboring communities, their vision, mission, and value statements really did a good job in trying to capture the essence of the community. I do think that things can be tightened up word-wise, but I think it's important that it's enough information that says this is exactly who we are, and this is what we see as a community for our future as a vision. So, yeah, I think it can be tightened up grammatically, and I'd be happy to work with Nicole on that. But, I think it's important that
You get everything in there.
not make it one sentence where we're missing the essence of who we are and what we hope for. So, anyways, 2 cents.
I agree with you.
Thank you for that. Does the board have any input to say?
I mean, I'd say the and is focus on education, the and is could go away.
yeah, I think after small town heritage, there should be a period. And then
Yeah.
the rest of it can go on, I feel like.
Or it could be a semicolon, and then you focus on education, recreation.
Yeah, take the and is
Social,
out.
economic diversity, and ensures equality. So, I mean, it could be like that, and take that and is.
Yeah, and the and
You're only dropping
between
2 words though.
recreation and social.
Yeah, but it's one less and is. And.
I'm making notes.
I mean, I had to find something wrong with it, just.
Improve.
Well, and I could also say, and after recreation, it could be comma, social and economic diversity, comma, and ensures, so I could get rid of another and probably there too.
Yeah.
I like it.
Any other questions by the board?
I think the other one that kind of caught my attention was on the draft values, the housing and economic development. The last, we have diverse and affordable housing options for all ages and wages. I think I would drop the ages and wages and just say
For all.
options for all.
You don't like the rhyme?
It's a little it's a little redundant. If
You're
we're
not
being
a Dr.
inclusive,
Seuss
we don't
fan?
need to
Dr.
list
Seuss?
all inclusiveness.
Wore me out on that.
Any other questions from the board?
like I said, other than that, I think you nailed it.
Awesome. Moving on, I will close
Do you wanna-
2022 dash. Oh,
Public hearing?
Public input.
is there any public input?
627 Louisiana Drive. So, as part of the working group for over a year, it was a pleasure, it really was. And I had hoped that more people, including board members, would have attended, and hopefully you'll look this comp plan over and understand it. Nicole did a great job in formatting it. The first, I don't know if you saw the first drafts, but they were kind of hard to follow and a little bit difficult to dissect. But she kind of, we asked her to kind of go back and kind of redo it, which is what she did. So this is really straightforward, and again, it's something that you can be proactive on. So I encourage you to embrace the comp plan as it is. Also encourage you to look at reviewing it on a regular basis. Whether you're a builder or whatever it is you do, it's important for our town. We all know it's changing. The dirt is moving, and things are gonna change pretty quickly from here on out. We're not this little podunk town anymore, really. Even though 92% of the people that live here commute to Durango, we can change that and we can make it more of a livable community, but we have to be proactive. I noticed today in the paper, Durango is already changing their codes and fees and development fees and all of that to try to keep up. Those are things we need to do as well. I don't think we're in really good financial shape from what I understand, so I think we need to look at doing things that are gonna really help our town. You've taken a position as a volunteer on the board. Please help us out as a town to make these things work. And make it more enjoyable for all of us, and make the process work too. I think we'll get more citizens involved as we move forward. I am encouraging, I'll be talking to Nicole about having a citizens advisory board formed, kind of a continuation of the working group. We did a lot of work, we put a lot of hours into this thing, and it really is here for you and for me as a town resident, but it's to help you all keep things moving in a positive direction. You all have busy lives, you know, breaking this down and putting hours and hours and hours into energy and housing and, you know, all the different facets that we did. That's a hard thing to do, and we know that, and that's why we formed the working group, and your town staff supported that. So we're here for you. We just ask that you embrace the process, and let's keep things moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public input? I know. So, so seeing no other public input, I will move on to the action agenda for the approval of September 12th, 2023 minutes.
I'll raise a motion for approval of the September 12th, 2023 minutes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes?
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chair Nyberg.
Yes. Moving on to the approval of October 10th, 2023 minutes. Roll call, please.
Well, I'll
Oh.
make a motion to
Oh,
approve the
sorry.
October 10th
I'll second it.
minutes.
Hearing a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes?
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chair Nyberg.
Yes. All right, moving on to approval of October 10th, 23 minutes.
Oh, we just did that.
Well, that one was. So moving on to 2022-10 Comprehensive Plan Update and Mission, Vision, and Value Updates.
First of all, I want to thank the working group. I really appreciate all the work. I know how many meetings you guys came to, and I wanted to come to a lot of those meetings, but I go to a lot of meetings already, so I was pretty busy. But I appreciate all the work you put in. I know that wasn't easy, and yeah, we thank you for that. What's the plan moving forward? So we want to approve it here to go to the board, and then do we include?
So you would approve planning, so planning commission, under state of Colorado statute, planning commission approves it. And so, but in Bayfield, we've always had the board actually give final approval, and in this case, what we would call, I think I wrote it here, ratify what the planning commission approves. But in the state of Colorado, planning commission approves the comprehensive plan.
But we don't have to
So-
state in the motion the changes, we just can.
You can just say I would say just as
As
discussed
stated.
at the
Okay.
meeting, as I wrote the notes down,
Okay.
and I can make sure I take those.
Well,
Or make
I
those changes.
before I just want to bring up, there's one, goal 5B, require affordable workforce housing through annexation process. The way that's written is that for annexation is contingent on affordable housing. Like, I just, the way that's written, it almost states that we have to enforce or affordable housing and workhouse through annexation process. I definitely think we need to encourage it, but to say that it has to be required for every annexation or put into dialogue, that process is not simple or easy. You can talk to the people that are working on the Haga property. It's a major investment, and I don't want to discourage development in the Bayfield community because we're requiring requiring, it's a shall, into our comp plan. I feel some strong wording would be appropriate, but not necessarily a shall statement, like a required. And then the same thing on C as the require an architectural amenity guide with a whole lot of caveats associated with that as well, which I'm not saying that that's not a good thing to do, and we need to make sure we keep ourselves accountable and hold a high standard, but it says that it shall include architectural characters, renderings of parks, open spaces, amenities, trails, walking paths, bike paths, and elements to serve the family-oriented neighborhood. That may just not be something that's going to go into every development and through the developmental process. And again, I don't want to discourage people from even starting the process before we get too far into it through our comp plan. It's just the required word specifically. I don't think it's a bad part. I think that's all important characteristics into addressing developments as they grow, but to say that they shall be required, I think is strong verbiage to be put in this. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I can kind of address where those came from. I'll start with that architectural and amenity guide, because we actually require it now for planning and developments. So Haga did have to do that already. As an example, Bayfield East has to do that with their PUD. And so it's already required with PUDs, and all we're doing is saying, well, all subdivisions, even if they don't come in as a PUD, it's a good thing for us to have as they are developing, just to make sure we know what we're getting in terms of the community. And so, like I said, it's already a requirement for most developments now that are coming in, but we just want to make it required for all. So we already have the code section of what's required as part of it. So it'd be a pretty easy change in the code and just require subdivisions that come in by right. So like, for instance, Ironton, that wants to do like the RV park and some multifamily and stuff, having something like that for them in the future, because they came in as a straight subdivision. They weren't required to do a PUD guide or a amenities guide. And the same thing with Mustang Crossing. We've worked with them to get the amenities, but they were straight subdivisions, so they weren't required to do the amenities guide. But it would have been very helpful probably up front if they provided, like, these are the types of amenities we're providing in our development at the beginning of the process, and they're required to address all of those. And if they can't, like, if say it's a small, tiny little, like Orchard subdivision, it's 1 acre, and they're trying to have a lot of density there, then maybe they just state in that, amenity guide they can't do a park. but they're gonna plan to pay for the park in lieu fee because it's such a tight space. But having them address it up front so that they know coming in, these are the things we'd like to see in our community, and you address it as part of this process. So that's what the thought process behind that one. And then the thought process behind the affordable workforce housing is, and again, these are just comp plans, so we actually have to take these and codify them. So we would have to create some standards in the land use code for what this actually entails, and maybe that's 2% of your, if you're building housing, 2% have to be a workforce level house or a deed restricted. I mean, so there's things that we can create as part of the land use code that gets into more the detail of what this means. This is more of that high level. But-
I just don't agree with putting those requirements on developers. It's something we can entertain and discuss on a case-by-case basis, but saying that it's required for developers is going to turn away interest in development into our community. If we say you have to do this, it's just that my opinion, because
Yeah.
they're the property owner and we want to make sure they do put in quality, but to say that how you should develop that land by using the word required, I'm not a fan of.
So if we took out required and said encourage,
Yes.
Well, here's
or
the thing though, if you don't require it and you
It
just,
doesn't happen.
you can't require it when you get to the hearing process, if it's not in the code.
Yes,
So
you
if
can
this-
by voting no.
Well, you can
That's-
vote
that's
no,
why
but
the
you
planning
can't
commission
require
exists.
them
Am
to
I
do
wrong?
it. Yeah.
I mean, people don't just to come apply and develop land without having a review process. Am I wrong? Like, I get the fact that this is a document, but we're putting in standards and requirements. That's why the planning commission is here. That's why the board of trustees exist, is that if they're not abiding with what the community wants through the review process, then we vote no. Am I wrong?
Well, in a sense, a subdivision that comes in by right and it's not required in the code, then we really don't have a legal standing to require it as part of their subdivision, especially if it's a subdivision. Now, PUD is different because that's a negotiated zone. So we have a lot more flexibility with the PUD to ask for certain things. But if somebody comes in with a subdivision that meets the code, it takes away a lot of that discretionary from the planning commission and the board of trustees. So you would have a really hard time requiring them to do something that's not in the code.
And again, I don't agree with the requiring affordable workforce
Okay.
housing and development.
I understand
I
that,
think
but
it's
just-
something we need to incorporate in our community, but saying every developer needs to do it is going to push away people that are gonna wanna develop, because some people don't want to go through the rigmarole of dealing with federal government, state level governments, and all the aspects to do deed restricted housing.
Well, help me understand what you said a minute ago about some of this needing to be cauterized to make it official, or so this isn't necessarily code.
The comp plan's not code.
So
This
it-
is
it's
our
in the-
big picture,
It's goals, it's,
and we gotta take it and make it code.
okay.
For requirements. Now, not everything needs to be a requirement. So, I mean, that's something you guys need to talk about is, do you think affordable workforce housing and architectural amenity guides need to be requirements? Because if you want them to be, we'll codify them as part of the comp plan and make them requirements. If you don't want them to be, then you can say encourage, and we hope that a developer comes in and wants to do it. But if it's not codified, and it's, again, there's a difference between the different types of zoning. If it's a straight zone in single families that use by right, you can't require them to do the things you encourage. And you lose some of, you don't have as much discretionary approval over that as you do a PUD, like the Haga property was. So it's just something you guys are gonna have to kind of discuss and bring forward to the Board of Trustees on what's, these two requirement proposals. Staff would like to see housing required. If you're annexing, 800 housing units or, 600 housing units like Bayfield East, I would love to have seen a requirement for some workforce or affordable housing in there somehow. But we didn't have that in place but that's, staff's, this is staff's dream list. You guys decide if
But
it makes sense or not.
My concern
And the-
is
and the
that
working group's
we
dream list.
have clearly outlined a need for housing. And I don't want to put in place discouragements from creating housing. And if we have developers and we tell them how they have to develop, then we're going to discourage some people from developing. And by stating that they shall have to incorporate affordable housing, I think is not intuitive to the other goals and requirements that are laid out quite extensively as you look at population growth and analyze all those things. Again, I just don't like the required through the annexation process, especially as we have our development map showing how much annexation we're setting forth in the next couple of years.
Well, and, I mean, the board did opt into proposition with 1, 2, 3. I know that we're covered, but to extend that over the years, I think that we have to have some sort of requirement to stay on that track. So I think you might get pushback from the board, so.
And again, annexations, even under state statute, they're negotiated. We don't have to annex property. So when you annex, that's when you ask for what you want to see. That's the time. And that's when they negotiate with you and agree. And if they don't want to agree, they don't have to annex either. But that's the time to do it. And that's why we put it in an annexation time. I would ask the chair.
Yes, you may.
Okay, Catcatzos, 525 Dearborn Road. I've lived in many, many places. We've owned 17 homes, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. And I've been involved in my communities wherever I've lived. Builders are desperate for land. Builders will do what the town requires. And I don't think that the money is going to dissuade them. It never has. In every town I've ever lived in, if those builders want to come in and buy the land, and that's their investment, they expect that. They expect those requirements. And I think that the small-time guy might be a little miffed by it, but the man who put in Mustang Crossing, you know, he was here to spend money. He'd already bought the land. He was committed. So I don't agree with your concern that it's going to dissuade people from wanting to develop here. Land is getting more and more scarce. Go to the Front Range. It's getting harder and harder to find land. Those builders will come here, and they are going to want to build. And we're going to have to be ready to direct them that's going to benefit our community. Yeah, it'll benefit the builders for sure, but we need to have things in place that protect and benefit our community. So I think required is a necessity. Thank you.
And I disagree with you.
And just want to add one thing, because I understand what you're saying in terms of the requirement. But, you know, like for instance, Mustang Crossing, you know, they're building quarter-acre lots. They're going to, right now, the real estate prediction, talking to realtors, is they're going to be selling for $650,000 to $700,000. That's great. That's great housing. That's not the kind of housing we need to make this a livable community. And we have to try and encourage our builders to bring us the housing that houses our teachers and our firefighters and our employees of our restaurants and stuff. And if we don't get that, I keep saying this, but a teacher that lives in Aztec right now and commutes, they're not going to commute long from Aztec to Bayfield. You'll commute to Durango. I did it for 16 years. But not a lot of people are going to be willing to commute to Bayfield. And at some point, they're going to live in Aztec, and they're going to get a job down there. And we want to make sure we don't lose our teachers and our firefighters and our restaurant workers. Some of our restaurants had to close a lot this summer because they can't find workers. And if people can't afford to live here, they're not going to commute far. We're different than a Durango.
My major issue is just like the development on Higa property is they're not building houses. They're building 1,000-square-foot small townhouses. These are not houses. These are not 3-bedroom, small family. If you look at the population breakdown density and everything, they're all families.
They're 3-bedroom.
Yeah, 1,000 feet, square foot. Have you been?
1,400.
I looked at the
1,400.
development plans. They're 1,000 square feet.
Maybe
a lot
the
of them.
first floor.
Yes, it's 1,000 square feet. And so you can cram 3 bedrooms into that. Do you know how small that is going to be, a 3-bedroom house, and you're not going to fit anything in it? So, like, just because it has the word attached affordable to it, is they're putting the same square footage. Guess what the square footage costs? The same what the realtors are selling, right? They're just building smaller houses. So I don't disagree with you, but the thing is that putting a requirement on landowners, I innately disagree with.
Okay, I understand. I'm just
And
explaining why
I don't
we're
believe that
proposing
it is our place as a governmental entity, and this is why we have this review process and this approval process. And if anything, I would encourage everybody up through the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission, if they don't agree with something, to vote no and not go through this regulatory process. We should encourage it, but I don't think we
But
should
we're not gonna
require
get
it.
We're
And
not
I-
gonna get it if we don't require it. I think
I'm-
that's the bottom line.
I'm okay with it because it says through the annexation process. I think that if a developer came and saw that and said, all right, I don't want to annex into the town, then I'm going to develop this property through the county. I guarantee you the county is going to up their game on that because they also have to fulfill Proposition 123. And their big push right now is affordable housing and workforce housing. So I think either way, we get ahead of it, and it's on an annexation. I'm not sure how much more land we're
Well,
looking
here's the
at.
other thing that's happening, and again, I understand where you're going with this. I'm the planner, so I'm gonna push this, but the governor tried to pass a House bill, what was it, Katie?
112 or
213.
213.
I can't remember.
And pretty much that
There's so many.
bill was taking the rights away from the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees to make land use decisions. And as part of that, he's saying he's not seeing enough in communities happening, and so he wanted to take it and make it a state issue and say that we had no say if somebody wanted to build multifamily next door to you, even though it's not zoned appropriately, the town cannot say no. That's what he's trying to pass. But he also is saying he wants to see communities step it up and start encouraging housing so that so that the state doesn't have to feel like they're the ones coming in and regulating everything. And so as part of that, we're looking at, okay, what can Bayfield do? What can we do to encourage this type of housing so that the state doesn't come down and say, you're going to be forced to do this? They're going to come down and say, oh, you have some good regulations that are really promoting housing in your community. You're doing a good job. So that's not the whole story, but that's also that's kind of our reality of what we're dealing with at the municipal levels, at the county levels in the state of Colorado right now. And so you're going to see us proposing some affordable housing and workforce housing initiatives for the community so that we are meeting those expectations, being able to tap into some funding to help like infrastructure costs, like for Haga, for instance, the town's actually the applicant for their grant. The only way they can get those units at a low price point that they're trying to aim for is to get some subsidy. And so we're applying for them and passing that money through because private developers can't apply for the grants that the state has right now for housing. And so we're trying to do that for them so that they can get this price point down. And it's going to take everybody trying to work on this together. So I understand your perspective, but I hate to say it, that ship's kind of sailed in Colorado, and we're being told we got to get on board and figure out. And we want to make the decisions for our community. We don't want the state telling us what to do.
Well, Ms. Katzos hit the nail on the head. My biggest concern is that we're just going to encourage large developers from out of state, places that don't have the best outlook for Bayfield as a city with our missions and goal statements coming into our community because they have the deepest pockets, rather than having a local developer that knows this community, that grew up in this community, has connections to this community, and respects what our community is trying to grow. And that's what I'm trying to prevent from being dissuaded, is that when we have people that want to keep their money local, that developers from out of state that don't have the best interest, they're just trying to capitalize on our land in this community, that we don't discourage our local people and community members that would want to potentially take that opportunity on because we have now restricted the decision that they want to make with their land. I just innately disagree with it. I'm not going to get into discussion about
Right.
our governor because I think that would dissuade even further outside the
Well, I'll
realm of
say
what
the
this
only
discussion point is.
developer-
But I disagree with setting these requirements
I understand that.
on
I've heard you.
landowners.
I think the only developer, though, that is willing to give us workforce housing right now is a local developer. The out-of-state developers are not doing that. So it's opposite of what you're saying. The one who's trying to help us is our local developer who cares about who's living in our community and who can afford to live here.
We're intrinsically going to disagree on this, so I just wanted to voice my opinion
Yeah.
to the rest of the board, and we'll vote on. I just don't, like I said, I have an issue with the word required in those places.
Brian Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. I agree with Commissioner Evans in that it will dissuade some developers. But it's also possible we may not want those developers in our community that won't agree to do what's best for the town. And I'm a realtor, I've been a realtor a long time, I do commercial developments. I represent developers, and I can tell you that the developers will do what's required. They won't do it unless it's required. That's 20 years of working with developers, and I represent them, and I know how they think, and that's the way they think. They will try to get everything they can get. That's their business. So I agree it may dissuade some developers from coming to Bayfield, but I'm not sure we want all those developers in Bayfield that won't agree to the requirements that we set forward for the vision we have for our town. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion on the comprehensive plan?
I guess there's a few things in there that I think we're walking kind of a fine line here with some of these requirements. And putting some of these requirements out there, then saying go build affordable housing. I mean, there's some things in here that just drive up cost. The require new housing units to be solar ready. Add $2,000 to the price of that house. You know, it's that kind of stuff that we gotta watch out for. We're talking both ways here. And, you know, I sat in a meeting today about energy code updates and how it's affecting, a project I'm working on. It's a transitional housing, low income, bringing people out of homelessness and putting them in a house. They added $500,000 to this project today because of some of these new energy code updates. And it's unfortunate. I mean, some of it's out there and code we can't get away from, but going above and beyond code with some of this stuff is where I get concerned. And pushing some of this and saying, we gotta adopt the 2021 energy code because that's the latest and greatest, without understanding some of those impacts or letting industry catch up to it, letting manufacturers let that price point kind of settle in a little bit before we bring some of that in. People wanna know why things cost a lot of money right now. It's that. I mean, our pure construction costs are up 50% in the last 3 years.
And I think part of that,
It's
the
a-
discussion we had, I know we had LPA here and Black Hills, and part of the utility discussion was, we had that same discussion. You know, you don't want to price out what we're trying to do, so affordable and building codes, and we even had that when we adopted the new building code. You gotta be super cautious, and that's why we went to the 18 instead of the 21. But we also wanna make sure that the unit is affordable long-term, and so looking at some of the energy savings they can have, does that make that a unit more affordable long-term with cost savings? And so those are the things we're trying to balance through all this. Is we understand there's an upfront cost, but solar maybe long-term can help keep that unit more affordable for whoever's in there, because they're not paying their electric bills as everybody else is.
It's, like I said, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not discouraging building efficiently and sustainable, but there's a lot of that the market's just not caught up to some of these requirements right now. I mean, what we were building 20 years ago as cutting-edge green buildings is now energy code. A lot of those probably wouldn't meet current energy codes. And they're just throwing more cost at it. And people can't figure out why price points are so high. So, just something to consider.
Can you clarify that statement for me? Require new housing units to be solar ready? Does that mean it's equipped with solar or
No.
it's capable of hooking up at
It-
some point?
Exactly.
That would be on the homeowner.
Yep, it's kind of ready for a plug-and-play kind of situation, but not, right now, we're not requiring solar on anything. Even the energy code doesn't require solar.
But that would increase costs on the house.
It would, yep. And that's why, again, I think that the discussion was always trying to balance it. How do we balance affordable and making sure that we're balancing sustainability and long-term sustainability, which hopefully leads to long-term affordability. But I don't disagree. I mean, adding those things does bring up cost.
One other thing, just a spelling error, I think, on page 28, goal 7D, continue to track and assess. I think we need another S on there.
What did you say?
Oh, thank you. It's the grammar,
Okay.
assess.
I had to look it up.
Google it.
I appreciate that, though.
I mean, going back to that on our goal 6E, you have recommend water-wise landscape standards and require new housing units to be solar ready. I would rather switch those. Require water-wise landscape standards and recommend.
Yeah. Solar right now, by the time your panels start paying you back, they're only 1 to 2 years away from needing to be replaced anyway. And that just puts more money where those homeowners are gonna have to keep spending more to upkeep that house.
There's tons of grant opportunities and things to help people pay for this out there right now, but it's a long-term maintenance issue. It's
They're just
a
not,
large upfront cost. I've seen a lot of school districts get sucked into these great deal leases to get solar panels. And then ends up costing them money at the end of the day.
yeah, they're just not.
Once their
far
solar
enough
panels aren't
developed.
producing enough power, and said they were gonna produce 10 kilowatts a year and they're only producing 8, then they're paying somebody up 20 grand a year to have dead solar panels sitting on their school. So, it's a growing industry, it's gonna get better, but
Yeah,
it's
just
not
not quite
there
developed.
right now.
I don't even know how to make this motion right now.
I mean, I think there's a lot of good stuff in this comprehensive plan. I appreciate everybody's efforts into it. My concern is some of this and what this plan truly means versus code and what were requirements of developers. Does this comprehensive plan, is it a requirement that all these goals that are within this be met for these developments? Or does this a guiding document to help us write future code?
Correct. That's what so it's a guiding document that helps us. Now, I will use it when a development comes in to say, is it meeting the intent of what we're trying to accomplish in the community? But the goals in this comprehensive plan, you'll see there's an implementation section and each goal is set, and then it's like, how do we accomplish that goal? And a lot of it's, town of Bayfield, it'd be code rewrites, but there's other, organizations that would help with that. But that's, the ultimate goal is to get some of this codified that needs to be. But there's just different goals, and I don't know, to give you a good example, like, where it says, well, parks and public spaces abut the Los Pinos River, this is goal 21C, I'm just reading off of it, provide safeguards, to protect it from new development, and that's just gonna be ongoing. And that's hard to kind of maybe create, maybe that's not the best example, but that's maybe harder to create a code section to versus something like, what we were just talking about is creating a code section for, reducing energy demands or something. Those are easier things to come up with code language for. So not everything in the comp plan is gonna become codified. Does that make sense? Some of them are just goals for the community that we wanna continue to attain, and others are things that if we wanna require them, we need to make them codified, or codify them.
But I think we need to be upfront with them, such as solar. So say you want to be on the solar grid and they look at Dove Ranch for existence. They're like, there's 10 homes up there. You're home 12 on the list. You're not going to produce as much electricity because 10 homes before you already have the priority and you're just kind of stepping into the grid, but yet you're putting all that money out there, but you're not getting the compensation for it.
So LPA, we asked this question of LPA when they were here, and they said that's no longer an issue for them. It used to be. So when I was in Durango a long time ago, they had to review all solar, and there were some that just said, we don't have the grid capacity for you to put solar back into the grid, so you're not a good candidate for solar. What they're telling us now is they don't have that issue anymore. Anybody who wants solar has the capability to do solar and put it back into the grid. That's what they told us. We asked it like 2 or 3 different ways to make sure we understood that that was no longer, they didn't have capacity issues any longer on the grid. That's what we were told.
No, and I just think that would be good for more people to know because I think they get that same information then they're like, I don't want to do solar because it's not
You're
efficient.
not gonna pay it back,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so we were told that that's no longer an issue
All
with
right.
the grid. But
But
again,
it,
we're just going off
but
of
it could
what-
become an issue though.
Well, I don't know if it will because they're trying to go that way. They're trying to use more green energy, and so I don't know if they're gonna stay ahead of
No,
that because they want it to be.
It's a grid limitation issue associated with.
Well, that's what we're told in the past, but
Okay.
we're being told it's not anymore. Again, I'm not their engineer. I was just listening to what they said and believing them.
Just the messenger.
And again,
They were the engineers from La Plata, like.
yeah, we
Way
asked this
above our
question
pay grade.
specifically, and that's what we were told. But, so I'm just relaying it back to you.
Thank you.
I'm not guaranteeing anything.
Any other questions from the board?
And so I guess just let me recap what some of the things I heard from the board, because I know Mayor Tarkington said, how do you make this motion? So there's a couple decisions. The first one that came up was the draft mission, and maybe taking some of those ands and is out and making that a little bit more concise. The draft values was removing the ages and wages piece of the draft values. And then we had a spelling error on goal 7D, the assess, so I have that one on there. And then concerns with the goal 5, B and C, using the words require for the affordable workforce housing and annexation and for the architectural amenity guide for all new subdivisions. And then the goal 6E, reversing E1 should be require waterwise landscaping, and E2 should be recommend solar ready. So those are the things I've heard so far from the Planning Commission. Did that help in any way?
Yeah, I'll make the motion and then you can, you can vote the way you want to vote.
Rearrange it for you.
I'd make a motion to approve resolution 2023-01, with updates to the draft mission, draft values, spelling on 7D, and 6E changes.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
I hear, roll call, please.
Commissioner Gad,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
No.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chair Nyberg.
No.
And that noted stuff we'll bring to the board as well for,
Yes.
okay.
I will, when I write the staff report, I'll make note of those corrections and changes.
And we'll bring up that discussion.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to number 4, discussion and adjourn. But I guess before I bring that up, I should have brought this up earlier. I had some constituents talk to me about Mississippi and the pothole, and people not being sure if it was a town road, which I'm pretty sure it's a town road.
It's a town road.
Yeah, and they're just wondering why it hasn't been addressed.
Oh, wait, this is a different pothole then.
No, it's the same
Oh, it's the
one.
same pothole.
Same
No,
pothole.
This is the same one from the very beginning.
Yeah, same one.
One of the problems that we're having is actually procuring a contractor to come out and do patchback. We had no luck this year. So as a matter of fact, a lot of the pothole patching that you saw done for the slurry seal project that went in, that was all done in-house. So we're looking at next year potentially addressing some of those issues in-house with renting a milling machine, milling some of those out and going back in with cold patch. We can't necessarily do hot pavement. I just don't quite have the experience on staff in-house to use a hot bituminous asphalt, but cold patch seems to be holding up okay, and we're gonna look at doing some more of that in the future. But
Well, and
like,
it's-
Leader and, Four Corners, you look at Elam, they're not interested in doing a 10 by 20 patch.
Well, and it seems like there's a sewer line that goes right under that patch too as well. So that could be part of the reason that it wasn't compacted right, or
It's settling
however.
for sure. It's
Yeah.
going in there, it's a service. So it's poor compaction, and it's been on the list, but that's really where the struggle is getting some of those smaller patches done, getting a large paving contractor to come out and do smaller patches.
Well, and it just seems like it should be raised up because they're doing that development in Mesa Meadows, and they're having trucks going down Louisiana and then going down Mississippi. So it's like they're making this circle, and it's not making it any better for the residents there. So,
All the trucks for Mustang Crossing should be accessing Mustang Crossing through the tracking pad off of Mustang.
you would think that, but it doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah.
So,
So, and I mean,
I'll
we don't-
vouch for
we don't
that.
monitor
They're
traffic in
not,
Public
they're
Works, but-
utilizing that subdivision.
Yeah, that should be, the construction interest should be
Yeah,
off
we'll-
Mustang going through
We'll reach out to
cul-de-sac.
the developer again because that was his intent. He might not know what the subcontractors are doing, but what he told us is they're all gonna try and access off Mustang.
well, it's kind of funny. They just had an HOA with Mesa Meadows, and it came up. They're like, we're not sure who owns the
The roads?
yeah,
Oh, the
yeah.
town.
Yeah.
So and that's what I thought too.
They're
But
dedicated on the plat to the
yeah,
town.
so I think that needs to be construed with them too, because that's taking a very big impact. So
Yeah, so all the streets in Mesa Meadows are maintained by the town. The walking paths are HOA,
right,
so
Correct.
that's the delineation for the maintenance
Yep.
over there.
And sidewalks are property owners throughout the whole community. Your adjacent sidewalk, even though it's in the right of way, it's your responsibility to maintain, keep clean of debris, including snow. That's the property owner, and businesses at the same.
right. But I don't see heavy trucks going over the sidewalks in this,
No,
and
just in general.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that one, but so it was just kind of brought up by other people. So
So I was there, and the conversation was that they wanted to know about that dip, and the conversation that I had was there wasn't any confusion about who owned the road. there was confusion about who was responsible for the sewer line compaction and not necessarily the road ownership. So if somebody misunderstood that at the meeting, that was, certainly would clear that up with ACCU, but
But the road goes over the sewer, right?
that's correct. And there was never any discussion about who owned the road, as far as I remember. It was just over the sewer line connection. It was a private service line.
Well, yeah, because if you look at it, the sewer line goes right under that
That's
divot right
correct.
there.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And that's conversations that Jeremy passed on to me, that I passed on to the HOA. But the road was never a discussion about who owned the road. I know who owns the road.
Well, and that's why I was confused, because if you were in that, you would have been able to clarify that. And so that's why I brought it to the attention. Because I think it was misconstrued, however it went.
I will certainly talk to Tim, who was monitoring that meeting.
Right.
There was never, as far as I know, the issue that I asked for is ACCU. I asked them to write a letter to the board, because keep in mind, I live there. We had 2 elected officials that live there. We have other members on staff that live in Mesa Meadows, and I asked them just to bring that as a top priority, because it looks like we're being beneficial to our own subdivision. It had nothing to do with whether the town did or did not own the road. And if somebody misunderstood that, I never asked that question specifically. The question is why isn't the dip had cured or taken care of? And I explained the asphalt and the issue with contractors, and keep in mind that was a question that was asked at that meeting. So if somebody didn't misunderstand, I was not aware that was the confusion.
Seems like there was some confusion there, so that's the only reason I brought it up.
Sure.
All right. So moving on, discussion and adjourn, November 21st, 2023, next Board of Trustees meeting.
So was there going to be an adoption of this resolution?
They approved it.
Okay, so what I have a 2022-10 comprehensive plan. So,
That's the project number.
okay.
But they just approved resolution 2023-01 with those 3 changes.
Okay, and was that understood? I just wanted to make sure, because
That was in the motion to approve resolution.
well, what I heard was the comp plan.
I'm pretty sure that was in your motion.
No, I read 2023-01.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving on to discussion and adjourn, November 21st, 2023, next Board of Trustees meeting. December 12th, 2023 is the next Planning Commission meeting. And then I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Jeremy, if you want somebody to do a concrete patch, I know a guy.
Apparently they need to look at the sewer